"Don't touch that IV line," the boy said. "She's not sick. Someone's making her sick." The room went very still. Harrison Caldwell, a man who had built 3 companies from nothing, who had sat across negotiating tables from senators and venture capitalists, who had not cried in 14 years, felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. He looked at the boy standing in the doorway of his daughter's room, maybe 11 years old, sneakers with a hole in the left toe, a backpack that had been repaired with duct tape across one strap, the kind of child you might not notice on a street corner, the kind you might walk past without a second glance. He had not been invited. The nurses hadn't buzzed him up. He had simply appeared, the way children sometimes do, slipping through the cracks of systems designed to keep the world orderly. "Who are you?" Harrison asked. "My name's Eli," the boy said, "and I know what's wrong with Nadia." 3 weeks earlier, Nadia Caldwell had been the kind of 12-year-old who made her father believe that the world was fundamentally good. She played piano, not because her stepmother Vivienne had insisted on lessons, but because she genuinely loved it. She could spend 3 hours on a single passage, not frustrated, just focused, the way some children are focused on video games. She collected pressed flowers. She kept a journal she never showed anyone. She had her mother's eyes, dark and very calm, and when she looked at you, you had the feeling she already knew what you were going to say. Her mother had died 5 years ago. Breast cancer, swift and merciless. Harrison had done what men like him do when catastrophe arrives. He had kept moving, kept working, built the 4th company. Met Vivienne at a charity gala in December, married her 14 months later. He told himself it was good for Nadia to have a mother figure. He told himself a lot of things in those years. Vivienne was beautiful in a very deliberate way. She was 41, kept herself carefully, spoke in a register that suggested she had been educated expensively. She was kind to Nadia in front of Harrison. She called her sweetheart and bought her things, a new bicycle, a cashmere sweater, earrings that Nadia thanked her for politely but never wore. Nadia did not say she disliked Vivienne. She simply became quieter. Harrison noticed it the way you notice a change in weather, the light shifting slightly, the air pressure dropping, and told himself it was adolescence. Then, in October, Nadia got sick. It started with fatigue. She slept 12 hours and woke up tired. Then there was nausea, a low, persistent headache, a loss of appetite that worried Harrison because Nadia had always eaten well, cheerfully, with enthusiasm. He took her to their family doctor, Dr. Ellison, who ran blood panels and frowned at the results and referred them to a neurologist. The neurologist's name was Dr. Shelby Crane. She was 48, competent and brisk, and she had been Vivienne's personal physician before Harrison had ever met her. Harrison did not know this yet. Dr. Crane ordered more tests. She hospitalized Nadia for observation. She spoke to Harrison in the hallway, in the low, measured tone that doctors use when they are managing your panic, rather than answering your questions. Possible autoimmune involvement, she said. Rare neurological presentation. They were running more panels. It would take time. Nadia lay in the hospital bed and grew thinner. She stopped asking to go home after the 2nd week. She just looked at the ceiling, or at the window, or at her father's face when he sat beside her, and she held his hand, and she did not complain. She was that kind of girl. Harrison sat beside her every evening after the market closed. He held her hand and watched the monitors and thought, numbly, about everything he would trade, every company, every account, every artifact of the life he had estled so carefully since the age of 22. He would hand it over without negotiation, without hesitation, for the sound of Nadia playing piano badly at 7 in the morning. What good was any of it, he thought, if it couldn't keep one small girl safe? Eli Marsh lived 4 blocks from Caldwell Memorial Hospital in a 3rd-floor walk-up that smelled of his grandmother's cooking and the particular cold that comes through old window frames in November. His grandmother, Pauline, was 67, worked the early shift at a dry cleaner's, and raised Eli with a combination of strict boundaries and enormous tenderness. His mother had left when he was 4. His father had never been particularly present, even when he was. Eli did not talk about this much. He understood early that some things were simply the shape of your life, and you either moved through them or you didn't. He was observant in the way that children are when they've learned to read rooms carefully, to sense when an adult is about to lose their temper, when a situation is about to change, when something is wrong beneath the surface of what's being said. It was a skill his circumstances had sharpened, the way cold water sharpens the edge of attention. He had met Nadia 3 months before she got sick. They went to the same public library on Thursday afternoons. Nadia came with her tutor, who spent most of the session answering emails. Eli came because the library was warm and had good books, and the librarian, Ms. Okafor, he still called her, that even though she'd told him her first name was Renee, let him sit as long as he wanted. They had started talking over a book, a biography of Houdini that Eli had wanted to check out, and Nadia had just returned. She told him the last chapter was the best part. He said he always read the last chapter first. She said that was wrong. He said it depended on whether you trusted the author. This conversation had gone on for 40 minutes. They were not what anyone would call obvious friends. But they were friends. When Nadia stopped coming to the library, Eli waited 2 weeks before asking Ms. Okafor if she knew anything. Ms. Okafor told him gently that Nadia was in the hospital and that she didn't know more than that. Eli thought about this for a long time. He was not the kind of child who accepted things easily when they didn't make sense. Nadia had been healthy. She had been more than healthy. She had been intensely, specifically alive in the way some people are, the kind of aliveness that fills a room. And then, between one Thursday and the next, she had simply collapsed. He started paying attention. He lived near the hospital. He knew the rhythm of the place. The shift changes, the families that gathered in the parking lot, the side door near the laundry room that was sometimes propped open on cold days by the housekeeping staff. He was a small, quiet boy who did not look out of place. People did not pay close attention to small, quiet boys who moved with purpose. He started listening. It took him 11 days to piece together enough of what he'd heard. Fragments of conversation, a name repeated more than it should have been, a face that appeared in the hallway outside Nadia's room too often, for someone who was supposed to be a specialist, consulted only occasionally. Dr. Crane, the way she spoke to Vivienne in the parking garage on the second Tuesday of November. The way Vivienne nodded, her expensive coat catching the fluorescent light, her face arranged in grief, but her posture exactly wrong, the posture of someone managing a situation, not enduring one. He overheard 6 words. 6 words, spoken quickly, in a parking garage, not meant for anyone. She's responding the way we discussed. He sat with those 6 words for 2 days. Then he walked into the hospital, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and found Nadia's room. Harrison Caldwell stared at the boy in the doorway for a long moment. He was exhausted. He had slept properly in 3 weeks. He had the hollow look of a man who has been holding himself together through sheer institutional habit, because there was no other option, because the alternative to functioning was unthinkable. His tie was loosened. There were shadows under his eyes that had not been there in October. "How did you get up here?" he said. "Side elevator," Eli said, "near the laundry. It's usually open." Harrison might have been angry. Under other circumstances he would have been. He was a man who valued systems, protocols, the reliable machinery of ordered process. A child wandering the hospital unsupervised was exactly the kind of thing that should not happen. But there was something in the boy's face that stopped him. Not urgency, exactly. Certainty, the particular expression of someone who has decided on a course of action after thinking carefully and is no longer second-guessing themselves. "What do you know about Nadia?" Harrison asked. Eli came into the room. He glanced at Nadia, who was asleep, her breathing slow and measured, her face thinner than Eli had ever seen it. Something moved across his expression that was grief and anger in equal measure, and then he put it somewhere internal and looked at Harrison directly. "She's not getting worse because of a disease," he said. "Something is being put into her. I don't know the medical words for it, but I know who's doing it, and I know that Dr. Crane is involved, and I know that it has to do with your wife." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "That's a serious accusation," he said carefully. "I know it is. You're what, 11 years old, 11 and a half, and I know what I heard." Harrison looked at his daughter. He looked at the IV line that ran from the bag on the stand to the inside of her elbow. He had never thought to question it. He was not a medical man. He trusted institutions. He had built his life on the reliable machinery of systems that functioned. He thought about the look on Nadia's face when Vivienne walked into the room, the way her eyes tracked toward the door, not with dislike, but with something quieter and more troubling than dislike. Wariness, the wariness of someone who has learned to be careful. He had told himself it was adolescence. "What did you hear?" he said. Eli told him. He was precise and economical in the way that people are when they have rehearsed something many times and are trying to get it right. He did not add interpretation. He reported what he had seen, what he had heard, the exact words, the context. He told Harrison about Dr. Crane's car, about Vivienne's posture, about the phrase spoken in the parking garage, "She's responding the way we discussed." Harrison listened without interrupting. When Eli finished, the room was very quiet except for the soft rhythmic sound of the monitors. "I could be wrong," Eli said. "I want you to know I've thought about that, but I don't think I am. And if I am wrong, it doesn't hurt anything to check. You just ask a different doctor to look at what's in that IV bag. You just ask someone who isn't Dr. Crane." Harrison looked at him. "Why did you come here?" he said. "Why not go to the police, or a nurse, or someone else?" Ellie looked down at his shoes for a moment, the one with the hole in the left toe, and then looked back up. "Because I thought you'd listen," he said. "Because she's your daughter. And because I think you already know something's wrong. You just haven't let yourself know it yet." What happened next moved quickly in some ways and very slowly in others, the way catastrophe always does. The actual events telescoping into hours, but the understanding of them taking much longer to absorb. Harrison called his personal attorney from Nadia's room. He did not call Vivienne. He requested that the hospital assign a patient advocate and an independent toxicologist to review Nadia's case. He did this quietly, without alarming anyone, in the measured tone of a man who has spent 20 years making decisions under pressure. He asked the nurse on duty to ensure that no changes were made to Nadia's IV line until the review was complete. The nurse hesitated. "She would need authorization," she said. "Dr. Crane had standing orders," Harrison said with the kind of calm that carries more weight than shouting. "I am her father. I am overriding Dr. Crane's standing orders, and if there is any difficulty with that, I need the hospital administrator here within the next 15 minutes. There was no difficulty. The toxicology review took 6 hours. Harrison sat in the hallway outside Nadia's room, in a chair that was not comfortable, and waited. Eli sat beside him. Nobody asked Eli to leave, and Eli didn't offer to go. They did not talk much. At one point, Eli fell asleep sitting upright, his backpack still on, and Harrison sat beside him and looked at the ceiling and thought about what kind of world produces a child like this. A child with a hole in his shoe, who has the courage to walk into a hospital room and tell a powerful man that his wife is poisoning his daughter because it's the right thing to do. What combination of circumstances, what specific difficulty had sharpened this particular boy into someone capable of that? He thought about Pauline, who he didn't yet know existed, who was probably at home right now, worried sick. The toxicologist came to him at 11:47 in the evening. "Thallium," she said. "Trace amounts, administered over time, in a form consistent with deliberate introduction rather than accidental exposure. Not enough to kill quickly, enough to sicken slowly, progressively, in a way that would be difficult to trace and easy to attribute to neurological disease." Harrison heard the words. He heard them perfectly clearly. And then he excused himself and walked to the end of the corridor and stood facing the window that looked out over the hospital parking lot, which was almost empty at this hour, and he put one hand flat against the glass, and he stood there for a while. He thought about Vivienne at the charity gala, the red dress. The way she had laughed at something he said, her head tilting back, her hand touching his arm. He thought about the wedding, about how he had told himself it was good for Nadia, about all the things he had not let himself see because seeing them would have cost more than he'd known how to pay. He thought about his first wife. Her name was Annette. She had been funny and stubborn and very bad at parallel parking, and she had loved Nadia with a ferocity that was almost frightening to witness. He had not let himself think about Annette in a long time. It had been too expensive emotionally. He had filed her away in the part of himself he didn't open. He thought about a 12-year-old girl pressing flowers in a journal she didn't show anyone, who had grown quieter and quieter, and he had told himself it was adolescence. He called the police. It unraveled the way these things do, not cleanly, not quickly, but inexorably. Vivienne was arrested at their home on Glenhurst Avenue at 2 in the morning. She did not shout or make a scene. She went very still, which was somehow worse. She asked for her attorney. Dr. Shelby Crane was brought in for questioning at her home in Lakeview. She initially denied everything with the polished certainty of someone accustomed to being believed, and then the pharmacy records surfaced. A compound ordered under a secondary identifier she thought was untraceable. And her certainty became something more brittle and more frightened, and she stopped talking. The motive, when it fully emerged in the weeks that followed, was exactly what you would expect, and no less appalling for its predictability. Harrison's estate was substantial. His prenuptial agreement was not. Vivian's attorney had been very good, and Harrison had been, in those early months of the marriage, something very close to happy, or at least close enough to happy that he had not been careful. The life insurance policy, the trust structure that would have given Vivian control of Nadia's inheritance if Nadia died before 21. These things had been arranged very carefully over the course of 14 months, with the specific patience of someone who plans rather than acts. Nadia knew none of this in the hospital. She knew only that her father was beside her more than usual, and that something had shifted in the quality of his presence, less managed, more real, the way people become when the performance of coping finally drops. She did not ask what was happening. She could feel the shape of it. She was that kind of girl. She woke up properly 3 days after the thallium was identified and removed from her treatment. Not dramatically, not the movie version of waking, sudden and complete. She woke the way you surface from a very long sleep, gradually, with moments of clarity coming more often and lasting longer, until one afternoon she opened her eyes and looked at her father and said in a voice still rough from disuse, "Dad, you look terrible." Harrison laughed. It was not a composed sound. It was the laugh of someone who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just unexpectedly been allowed to put it down. "I know," he said. "I know I do." "Is Eli okay?" she asked. He hadn't expected that. "You know Eli? He's my friend," Nadia said with the simple directness of children who do not over-explain their relationships. "He's the one who told you, isn't he?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," Harrison said. "He is." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "He reads the last chapter first," she said, "which is wrong, but he has good reasons. Ellie came to see her the week she was moved out of intensive care. He brought a book, a different Houdini biography, a newer one, which he had checked out from the library and which he placed on her bedside table without ceremony. Better photographs, he said. Also, there's a chapter on how he actually did the underwater coffin escape that the other one glosses over. You've already read it, Nadia said. Cover to cover. Also, last chapter first. She smiled. It was still a tired smile, still the smile of someone who had been very sick for a long time, but it had her in it. Her specific quality of attention, her specific warmth. Harrison watched them from the doorway. Two children who had met over a book in a library, who had become friends in the undemonstrative way that serious children do, who had saved each other in ways that would take years to fully understand. He thought about what Eli had said in the hallway that night. You already know something's wrong. You just haven't let yourself know it yet. He had been thinking about that sentence for days, about how much of life was exactly that, the knowledge you have that you have not yet allowed yourself to hold, about how it takes courage to hold it, and about how that courage is not evenly distributed in the world, and about how a boy with a hole in his shoe and a duct-taped backpack had had more of it in that moment than he had. He met Pauline a week later in the hospital cafeteria. She was a small woman with watchful eyes and a quality of contained exhaustion that Harrison recognized, the exhaustion of someone who has kept things going for a very long time without much help. She was formal with him at first. She knew who he was, or rather knew what he was, the category of person she had spent her life in the service of, in one form or another. He did not try to bridge that gap with money, which was his first instinct and which he recognized, with some effort, as wrong. He sat across from her and he told her what her grandson had done. Not the version where it was a nice story, the real version, where it was terrifying, where the risks Eli had taken were serious, where it should not have fallen to an 11-year-old boy to see what adults had missed. Pauline listened. Her hands were folded on the table. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. He's always been like that, she said, since he was small. He sees things. She looked at Harrison steadily. I've worried about it. Some people, when they see things, it gets them into trouble. This time, Harrison said, it got my daughter out of it. She was quiet again. Then, what is it you're asking? He had thought carefully about this. He had specifically not wanted to make it transactional, because it wasn't transactional, and because Eli was not the kind of child who should be treated transactionally. What he had arrived at after many days of thinking was simpler than he'd expected. "Nothing right now," he said. "I'd like your permission to know him, to be part of his life in whatever way is useful, not the other way around. He's going to be remarkable, whatever he does. I'd like to be in a position to help when the time comes, that's all." Pauline studied him. She had very good eyes for people. She had developed them out of necessity. "He's not a project," she said. "No," Harrison said. "He's not." Another pause. The cafeteria hummed around them. Someone's phone rang in the corner and was quickly silenced. "He likes books," Pauline said finally. "The library's fine, but the selection could be better." Harrison nodded. "I know a librarian at the city branch who runs a reading program. Independent, city-funded, no strings. Eli could attend if he wanted." "If he wanted," Pauline echoed, and it was both a question and a condition. "Always," Harrison said. "If he wanted. That's the only kind of thing I'm interested in." Nadia came home on a Tuesday in late November, 3 days before Thanksgiving. The house on Glenhurst Avenue had been cleared of Vivienne's things while Nadia was in the hospital. Not erased, exactly, but put in order. The way you put a room back to rights after it has been disrupted. Harrison had hired a housekeeper, a quiet woman named Pearl, who had the excellent quality of being competent without being intrusive. Nadia walked through the front door and stopped in the entryway and stood there for a moment, just breathing. Harrison watched her from behind, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. She went to the piano first. She hadn't played in 3 months. She sat down on the bench, not dramatically, just sat, and put her hands on the keys and played a scale. Then another. Her hands were still not quite steady. The thallium had left some tremor that the doctors said would improve, but the sound was there, the specific sound of this instrument in this room, which she knew better than any other sound in the world. She played for 20 minutes. Harrison sat on the bottom stair and listened and did not try to say anything. When she stopped, she turned around and looked at him. "Can Eli come for Thanksgiving?" she said. "I already asked Pauline," he said. "She said yes." Nadia looked at him with her mother's calm, dark eyes. "Good," she said. "He should see how we do things, so he can tell us where we're wrong." She turned back to the piano and played the passage she had been working on in September, the one she hadn't been able to get right. It still wasn't right, but she played it again and again, with the specific focus of someone who is not frustrated, just determined, who understands that the distance between where you are and where you need to be is not a problem but simply a fact, and that facts can be worked with, given time. Harrison listened, and for the first time in a very long time, he let himself believe that there was enough of it.